What's up, guys? Two major changes ahead of you. Yes, I finally have hair. I'm not your favorite bald YouTuber anymore. And second of all, we're gonna do a different type of video this time, since I get a bunch of questions about the ideal agency structure, the perfect way an agency should be ran in terms of all the different departments, all the different leaderships, the chain of command and the employees you run. So I'm gonna be sharing my own agency setup here. Obviously, there's a disclaimer, since some of you just make like 5K per month. Some make 50K, some make like 300K, some make a couple of millions. So I will give different pointers to when certain things become relevant, how you can implement them even if you're a smaller agency type stuff. And I'll run you through the entire agency from the top to the absolute bottom. So let's get right started. Now, first of all, we have the C-suite, meaning we have our CEO, CFO, and COO. Now, the overall focus of the C-suite is obviously to bring in a vision and to get the agency forward. Now, when we're talking about the CEO, the CFO, etc., you guys can ask ChatGPT what these terms mean if you don't know. In essence, it means you need one CEO who's the head of the agency. Now, if you do it alone, perfect. Then I guess you're the CEO now. Congratulations. If you do it with a friend or a couple of friends, be very aware one of you needs to be the decision maker. Now, I don't really care how good friends you are, how well you get along. You might be perfect brothers, right? No beef, nothing. You still need a decision maker. I'm not saying this because I think you may not be able to talk with your boys. I'm not saying this because I think one of you is maybe smarter than the other, which for us is not the case. I'm working with a partner myself. None of us is above the other one, but we communicated very clearly. One of us needs to have the bigger leverage and needs to be able to do decisions in the end, even if the other one doesn't agree. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Like, especially when your business grows and you get to a point where we're talking 6 figures, 7 figures per month in revenue, you need to have someone who does the decisions all day and someone who always brings in the suggestions, like a CEO, for example. So, role of the CEO, very simple. Do all the important decisions and bring in strategy and vision. Your job is not to keep the agency afloat. Your job is to basically envision how the agency should be in the next 3 months, in the next 3 years, and then set action plans for your lower level employees to execute them and get the agency where you want it to be. So you shouldn't work in the business, you should work on the business, right? Your job is not to keep it alive, your job is to make it more alive. So while you do that, you have your COO, your Chief Operating Officer, meaning what he's going to be doing is essentially make sure the agency runs efficient, right? He's going to take a look at all the different departments, check out how the work is getting done, what can be ensured. And he's kind of like more in charge of like the day-to-day operations. This doesn't become relevant in the beginning. You don't need a COO directly from the start. And don't be afraid of these terms. This sounds very corporate-ish. It means very simple things. You kind of have to understand what I mean by that. So your CEO could just be your friend, could be your partner. Where you're like, okay, once we make like 6 figures, it's not going to be like me doing traffic and you doing backend. It's going to be me being the CEO and also taking care more of the traffic side. And you take care of the backend. But since we have employees for that now, you're more going to be able to check how efficient the agency runs and which processes can be optimized. He's going to look at the spreadsheets and all that stuff. If your partner is like a big numbers guy, this is the job for him. Now, as a third C-suite position that can make sense for OFM agencies is a good CFO, like a chief financial officer who's going to take care of like all the banking, the financials, the accounting. He will also work with all the accountants, all the banks, right? This is his job, which I can tell you takes a shit ton of time because you're always in some banking calls, you're always in some bullshit. So this position becomes relevant once you're pulling in a few 6 figures per month. You can even get it earlier, and trust me, you won't lose money on it. You will save money and even more save a shit ton of time. So your CFO isn't really in charge of like the day-to-day decisions and operations, but he's obviously in the C-suite, so I'll level them here. But your CEO and your COO, so you and maybe your partner or your partners, you guys are going to be in charge of the agency and you're going to essentially manage, like on puppet strings, manage the entire thing. So as a TLDR, the C-suite has to bring vision and strategy in, make all the decisions, and ensure the business stays competitive. You guys at the C-suite, which I assume I'm talking to in this video, you have to make sure that the business doesn't fall out of line. It doesn't become like unprofitable. It doesn't become lazy. It doesn't become inefficient. And also it's always moving forward. Since as everyone knows who consumes business content on YouTube, if a business isn't improving, it's declining. So you have to make sure you're always on the improvement side of the things and you're not declining, and you have to see red flags, you have to see bad habits and bad strategies before they actually happen. This is your job. All right. Below you, we have the head of the department. Now, for example, your head of marketing, and before I get into this, let me give a quick disclaimer. Especially when you set a structure like this up, you don't need a specific person for each thing. You can also have, for example, if you work with a partner, be the COO and the head of marketing. You can be the CEO and the head of people, right? You can give multiple positions to certain people. This is how Fortune 500 companies do it as well. You shouldn't obviously be head of 5 different departments, but you don't want to pay like 50 fucking managers at the same time, because these people are your core team. You can also have a head of marketing and head of people, and then you as a CEO or the head of sales in the meantime. Now, the head of marketing is in charge of the overall traffic and front-end department. Everything that happens before the paywall is his responsibility. That means not only the traffic itself, right? The Twitter, the traffic, the Instagram, the dating apps, I guess, but also the overall online presence, how the creator is essentially shown in the public. He doesn't manage single creators. He manages the entire department, the employees, the managers, which I'm going to get into later. Now, for these type of positions, you need smart people. This is not a Filipino VA task. You need smart, intelligent people who are able to lead. So if you don't have anyone in your close circle, like maybe a friend or a brother or other employees out of first world countries that you've worked with, once you make 6-7 figures, this is the time where you want to hire outside of the OFM industry. Having a good head of marketing that you can teach him the OFM game pretty fast, that's going to be a leverage to your business, because at this point, you're a professional business. Even when you're making 5K per month, you're not like some idiot in front of a MacBook. You're the CEO and you should behave like one. Now, head of people obviously is in charge of human resources, as gay as it sounds, obviously taking care of overall employee structure, employee payments, all that stuff, making sure your team is happy, making sure the recruitment is going strong. He's going to be in charge of getting creators into the agency, of getting new employees into the agency, of overviewing the hiring processes. Now, as the head of a department, I will get to the overall definition later, but he's not sending outreach DMs. Like for those of you who maybe are not at the point yet, because you need to know this stuff. His job is not to send out outreach messages or to do job interviews, maybe at the last stage. His job is to give feedback, overview all the other employees who are taking care of the day-to-day tasks. The head of sales is pretty self-explanatory. He's obviously going to take care of the back end and the chatting, meaning he's going to handle the OnlyFans accounts. He's going to handle the chats, the VAs, all that stuff. Now, we have a fourth department head, which is the head of legal. Now, this becomes relevant once you hit the 6 figures realistically, but it's going to definitely pay off. Now, this doesn't have to be a strict hire. You can also have an accountant just like on a call basis away. But I can recommend having, for example, like your let me scroll up again, having your CFO also be the head of legal if he's kind of experienced with laws, because you're going to run into the common dispute here and there. You're going to have creators not pay your invoice. You're going to have chatters have a legal problem. Nothing to do with you, right? But you want to be able to help them. So having a head of legal, having someone kind of like a lawyer, like a Saul Goodman, who just knows his shit, he knows what to do, and he can give you instructions. You can hit him up, be like, hey, can we do this? Is this a good idea? And he's going to be like, fuck no. All right. Make sure to hire someone who's actually cool. Make sure to hire someone who's aware of laws, but also how to work with them, and not just someone who read a law book. We've had a head of legal, I can tell this funny story, who he was kind of like autistic. He knew every single law in this industry. It's crazy. You could ask him and he would tell you exactly how the law is. He didn't have to Google out, use ChatGPT or whatever. But he was shit at working with laws. Like, I'm going to put this in legal terms here, but if the law is X and you want to do Y, a bad accountant be like, the law is X, you can't do Y. A good accountant and a good lawyer will, okay, the law is X, here are the options we can use to still do Y. Like, you want a head of legal that is solution orientated, okay? He has to think in terms of possible solutions, which I can give you as a pointer, because otherwise you're just burning money down the drain. Now, the overall role of the leadership of like the head of departments is essentially using the strategy that you at the C-suite as the CEO, as the COO give. You have a plan, you have a vision, and they have to formulate that into an actual action plan and make sure it gets implemented in the agency. This is super, super important, because otherwise you're just going to give instructions and action plans and they're not going to be reality. So make sure that your head of departments manage those strategies, manage to meet the objectives, and also cross-coordinate. So for example, if your head of marketing says, hey, we got a bunch of subscribers on the IG commenting that the profile is a ripoff, then he can tell that to the head of sales and he will take action steps into his own hands to optimize the backend overall. So these head of departments should have regular weekly or at least bi-weekly meetings where they discuss all of the different problems in the leadership itself. Now, next up, we're going to your core team. And to the core team still, we're talking first world employees, intelligent killers, okay? These people have to be your core team. Everything that I've mentioned so far, all of these people, including the core team, all of these should be a close circle and you should be in more or less close contact with them. Because these people have to be smart enough to lead other people. They have to be intelligent enough to bring suggestions on their own, improve systems, and they have to be hardworking enough so they don't have to be followed every single day. Like these people, they should work. Obviously, this shouldn't be a matter of, oh yeah, they're hardworking. No, of course they are. They're a manager, they're a head of a department. They're hardworking anyway. And above that, you're searching for intelligence, leadership skills, and proactivity. Now, in the marketing department, you have, for example, an IG manager, Twitter manager, threads manager. You could potentially have a manager for each model. So you have, for example, manager for the model Sarah, you have a manager for the model Sophie, which can work. I'm not talking bad against that. I could just tell you this is super fucking inefficient because they're never gonna be the expert in their own department. You want your IG manager to spend 10 hours per day on IG and don't do anything else, consume marketing content for IG, buy courses on IG, right? Watch IG videos of his favorite, not bald anymore, YouTuber on YouTube, right? So having your IG manager, Twitter, threads, whatever, they're gonna be in charge of the different departments. So every model that does IG is kind of under his wing, the same for Twitter, the same for threads or dating apps or YouTube or whatever you're planning here. Now, for the head of people who's beneath him in the core manager team, we have a recruitment manager who's just in charge of getting creators, right? So this is his sole purpose. He's taking care of all the recruitment methods, which I'm going to go to later. Obviously, the creators are also working with the head of people, which is kind of like a weird name. I am aware, it's just the overall corporate term. He's going to be talking to the creators, make sure they're okay, make sure the creators have a system that makes them happy. It's kind of like the human resources thing, right? So I can, by the way, very, very recommend to have a female head of people. I know female human resources employees are kind of a meme, I know, but especially when talking to creators, especially when it's about creating harmony in the company, which for you and me probably, we don't give a fuck about harmony. We just want to work and make our money, especially for the lower level, not in a disrespectful tone, but just like in terms of responsibility. For the lower level employees, harmony and having a good company culture, all of this stuff is super, super important. So having at least a female creator manager, but definitely a head of people, can definitely make sense, especially if she knows the game and she's kind of sharp. Now, next up, we have the hiring manager who's obviously in charge of getting you employees, right? He's going to work with headhunters, do job posts, do all the hiring stuff, the job interviews, right? He's going to take care of that. And most of these positions don't get relevant until you're at like 50K per month, right? But you have to outsource it anyway. Like you can't be, as a CEO, you can't be in job interviews and creator calls all day long. You have more important shit to do. So next up, obviously in the head of sales in the chatting in the backend position, we have a chatting manager and directly below him a backend assistant. Now, why did I structure it like that and not in the other departments? You have to understand that the overall chatting manager has probably the most workload in the entire agency. You might not think that, but we have chatting systems, we have news sub analysis, we have the VA management, we have the VA feedback, we have the overall payment structure of the different VAs, we have the onboarding phase, the training. It's a huge fucking workload and not a single person can do that all day. So what you want to have is this double combo of a manager itself and his backend assistant, kind of like the first guy below him, where the chatting manager can take care of the things that he sees fit. For example, okay, we got 5 new chatters, I'm going to train them now. And in the meantime, the backend assistant is going to take care of the day-to-day shit. So you need this double combo, otherwise you're fucked. Because one chatting manager alone, especially when you're working with multiple creators on multiple accounts with like 20, 30 chatters at least, you're fucked. You can't handle all of them yourself, or you're just going to lack efficiency and you're going to lack quality, if that makes sense. And your head of legal is obviously just going to do legal stuff, right? Like you just trust him to do his shit. Ideally, you just pay him like a monthly retainer and that's it. Now, overall, to sum it up, in your core team, which I call it, like overall the managers, they have to lead everyone and they have to basically make sure your team performs. This is like the day-to-day stuff. Obviously, I wrote it down here. They have to supervise all of your employees. They ensure, okay, we meet the goals. Every employee does what they're supposed to do, right? If the leadership, for example, has an action plan for something that needs to be implemented, right? Your core team, your managers are going to make sure that this is assigned to specific people, manage the workflows, give updates, get all the ETAs and communicate them upward the chain of command. They're also going to provide like feedback, training, performance reviews, meaning your IG manager is going to give feedback. They're going to basically make sure your team meets the standards. They're going to tell them what exactly to do. They're going to create the SOPs. They're going to make sure the SOPs are actually followed for the next chapter. Now, one step below them are the, let's say, normal employees. Here you can still work with VAs or Filipinos. I still recommend, especially if you're a bigger agency, to work with first worlders or people that you know kind of have like this creative mind. Because until here, a lot of the jobs that people are going to be doing are very creative. They're very, I don't want to say intelligent jobs, they're very abstract, okay? Leading people, creating systems, finding new strategies. That's all very creative and that's very hard to teach. So you want to make sure you work with people who have that skill in their mind when you hire them. Now, for basic employees, I mean, obviously on the IG side, you have a researcher, right? He's going to scroll Instagram, send different content examples so you can create the Instagram reel lists, right? He's going to send this to the IG manager who's going to create them. They're going to make sure they're up to date with all the different content structures. They're going to make sure they're up to date with trends, changes in the algorithm, etc. Now, your marketing team, which is overall for every single manager relevant, right? The research is mostly on IG. You can have one for Twitter and Threads, but let's be honest, that doesn't take too much time. Now, your marketing team overall is essentially everyone you need before the pure manual work, meaning you're doing Twitter, you're doing Threads. Your marketing team, which you're probably going to hire at like 200K plus in order to scale, they're going to ghostwrite the tweets, they're going to schedule all the content, they're going to set up the profiles, the funnels, right? This is a very broad job description because here it gets very individual to your agency setup. Now, when we come to the head of people department, your recruitment manager is going to talk to headhunters, for example, to get employees, right? So he's going to talk to headhunters, he's going to set up the job posts, etc. And from the headhunter, I can tell he's going to also talk with recruiters. Now, for your hiring manager, when we're talking about getting new creators into the agency, which is a far bigger department than just getting employees, obviously your hiring manager has his model scouts set up, right? He's going to make sure that he has contacts in different cities or different business models that refer creators to your agency. He's going to have outreaching VAs and a paid ad team and whatever else you do for recruitment of creators. Now, your hiring manager, like I said, he should ideally be the one who essentially talks to the creators, who finds them and who gets them on. Like your model scouts should just do the referrals, but recruitment is a very deep topic itself that I'm going to do videos on in the future. I could just tell you having scouts here in the normal employee chain makes a lot of sense. Why do I say it like that? Because your scouts are effectively the easiest way to refer creators, and hiring one full-time makes a shit ton of sense. They're gonna bring you the most money. And let me tell from experience, I have a big YouTube, I have a big group, I have a mentoring, all that stuff is cool and that brings me good model referrals. I ain't lying, but the most referrals we get from scouts and from paid ads. But scouts are fucking cheaper than paid ads, I can tell you guys that. So if we go to the backend sections, obviously below your manager and your assistant, you have your supervisors. Now, your supervisors are going to make sure that all your chatters work. All your chatters do their shift reports. All your chatters implement the SOPs that are given to them. And also your supervisors are going to make sure they're going to use the CRMs the right way, for example. So if we're talking about SOPs, right? Let's say your chatting manager creates an SOP for using, for example, Create Hero the right way, right? I'm going to bring this example since, as you've seen in one of my last videos, I've bought the co-ownership, and even before that, it's the best CRM on the planet anyway. So if you're not using it, you're kind of a dumbass. I think I still got like a discount code for 75% off in the first 3 months. So make sure to use that. I'm going to put that in the video here while this is active, right? This is a one-time thing since I bought the co-ownership. This is not going to return. Now, if your chatting manager creates an SOP on how to use Creator the right way, which features, which automations, the AI translator, whatever, your supervisor gets it, understands it, and gives it to your chatters. Now, I could go on into like what their specific tasks are day to day, but then this video would be like 5 hours long. I can just tell you, make sure your supervisor has a clear SOP themselves and a clear procedure on how to give feedback, how to implement things, how to talk to chatters, conflict resolution SOPs, how to handle chatters lying or not turning up to their shift. They need to know their game, and they're in charge of essentially communicating the action plans to the chatters. So overall, your employees, they have to execute assigned tasks, right? They just do the job and they achieve department goals, but they're also communicating a lot. Like communication is one of the core things for employees, because if you have, for example, like a supervisor, it's their job to command back to the chatting manager, hey, we hit these and these targets today. We have these problems in the chatting right now. This thing that you tasked us 2 days ago, now it's done, or this is the progress. Because then the chatting manager can communicate to the head of sales and they can communicate back to you, the cool CEO in his office with long hair at this point. So communication on the employee side is super, super important. You have to teach them to be proactive with their communication, because if your employees need to be followed up with for information, you're never going to hear about it as the CEO. So make sure your employees are proactive. They are coming to you with solutions, not with problems. They're coming to you with updates about everything. And obviously they have to also bring you ideas for process improvements, because they're deep in the system, right? If you want to improve the chatting, let's say here, the head of sales isn't in the day-to-day processes that much. He doesn't know what the subscribers actually say. They don't know how the subscribers buy the content if they don't buy the content. So it's the job of the supervisors who are kind of in the system to bring these ideas, to say, hey, I think we should do this. They're going to send this to the chatting manager. Either he has the power to implement that shit himself and be like, okay, let's do it. Or if it's a major change, he's going to talk with the head of sales, right? And this is kind of the chain of command. Communication in this here is key, because once your agency becomes that big, you have a big fucking problem if you don't know what's going on, even on the employee level. Now, as a last level, we have VAs and contractors, meaning in your marketing team, you have below that, you have some editors, you have people who post, right? They don't have to be VAs. That can also be like your little cousin or your girlfriend or the guy you knew in high school once and you pay him like $2,000 per month to just post content on Instagram accounts. That all works, right? So these are your VAs, your contractors. They just do a very simple task with a very, very clear SOP. Same as marketing VAs, right? On Reddit, on Threads. They just post. They do what you tell them to, and they get money for it. Very basic. For headhunters, that could be, for example, a recruiter to get you employees. It can be a paid ad team. They're just in charge of setting up new ads, doing exactly what they're told to do, and funneling the people to the recruitment page or whatever. Outreaching VA is the same. They just send messages and they get money for it. This is a very basic VA and contractor stage. The same with the chatters. I think that does make sense. Now, overall, your VAs, their focus is to follow clear SOPs and instructions. They shouldn't think outside the box. If they can, perfect, promote them to employees. But they should just follow what they're told to do. And because they have a very important task in the business. Without your VAs, this is your foundation. Without your VAs, your entire business crumbles. So while they have such an important role in your company, it needs to be very sure that it's your responsibility to give them those SOPs and to tell them exactly what to do. And also have your chain of command make sure that these things are actually done the way you want them to be done, right? Because if your VAs are not doing what you tell them to do, if they're lazy or they're not doing exactly what they're told to do, your entire business collapses. So make sure they are taking care of the manual tasks the right way, because they're an asset, right? The day-to-day tasks are being done by them, very manual work, more or less. It's more about like the labor itself, the posting, the chatting. And obviously I can just give you guys the pointers that if you work with VAs, you want to make sure that you work with them long-term. You don't want to just be the agency that burns through like 10 chatters per month and just always hires new ones. Because I can tell you, especially for chatters, working with chatters for like 1, 2, 3, 4 years is the number one thing that's going to fix your chatting. If you have a shit ratio, I guarantee your chatters haven't been with you for a long time. Because if you work with chatters for a year, and obviously you have high standards, so if you keep them, they're obviously good employees, they're just going to know the game. And if you work with these people for a longer time, your supervisor has way less work micromanaging everyone. They can just get them to a point where they need them to be and then focus on the other shit, meaning your chatting manager has a way easier job implementing stuff. Your head of sales works with way faster speed, and he can just give action plans and be very reliant on the people below him because he knows it's going to get implemented. And you as a CEO can just create a better vision and a better strategy for the future. And you can do actual decisions that get implemented faster. So what I'm trying to highlight here is even on the lowest level of the chain of command, you shouldn't just forget about these people. Now, as a resume, I've talked a bunch of corporate stuff in this video, right? Everyone who's making less than 50K probably was smoking out of their ears, thinking what the hell is even going on. Now, the reason I'm breaking it down like that is very simple, because you can always get up to like 20, 30, maybe 50K a month when you're like just an idiot in front of a MacBook. You have a couple of chatters that you as a CEO manage directly, right? That's possible. But we're not in this industry to make 50K. I mean, how much profit is that? Like 20K, 15K after taxes. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's not why you're working 12 hours a day, is it? So your goal is obviously to go up to like the 500K, 1 million mark, which even as big as it sounds, this is kind of the stage where you're actually making money. And I'm not trying to be arrogant, but if you're making 200K per month, which for I think a lot of people on this video sounds like a lot. Okay, you're giving away like 30, 40% to the creator minimum. You have your chatter salaries, you have your taxes, you have all the different employees, right? You have expenses for the business. Like you're left with what? Like fucking 40K, 50K, something like that. That's not that much money if you compare it to like where you want to end up at. That's not Lambo money, that's not Bugatti money, that's not traveling around the world money, that's living in a cool city with like a nice car and a nice apartment and going to clubs money. But that's not generational international business money. So if you want to go up to like making 100, 200K per month minimum, you probably have to earn like 600, 700K. If you want to go to the 300, 400K mark, you minimum have to do $1 million a month with your agency, meaning for that, this structure becomes relevant. Now, in order for you guys, if you're, let's say, at the 20K mark right now, obviously having a CEO, COO structure, if you have a partner, makes sense. Head of marketing makes sense and head of sales makes sense. This is what you should definitely have. Who take care of your chatting manager and your backend assistant, your supervisors, right? And the marketing department the same. Now, head of people, overall, costly, but can make sense. What you should definitely have is a creator manager, especially female one, who talks to your creators, who makes sure they're happy, who essentially communicates with your creators on a day-to-day basis. You don't want to do that till the end of the day. It's super fucking annoying. I don't know about you guys. For me, it's the most annoying thing ever. So having these type of positions in your agency makes a lot of sense even from the start. And understanding the structure is super, super important for you to know where you want to end up at, right? Because if you're hiring new people, you always have to ask, okay, which of these positions am I actually filling? Okay, and which of these positions should I possibly fill? If my fucking chatting manager has like 12 hours of work every day, I might as well just hire more supervisors or hire him a back-end assistant. So you already know what the next steps are, you just need to implement them. Now, with that being said, take a look at the other videos on my channel to essentially know what you specifically do in these different departments, etc. How to run the agency, how to be a CEO. But with this video, hope I could clarify the overall agency structure that I use. With that being said, wish you a wonderful day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.